Hello dear students, welcome back. So we were doing the fundamental rights. So in this session we will take up the fundamental right to equality of opportunity in public employment, which is enshrined in Article 16 of the Constitution. See, Article 16 says, number one, there shall be equality of opportunity for all citizens in matters relating to employment or appointment to any office under the state. So not here, this is available to the citizens. Okay, it's to all the citizens. Now the second thing is about Article 16, it's the second clause actually. It says no citizen can be discriminated against or be ineligible for any employment or office under the state on grounds only of religion, race, caste, sex, descent, place of birth or residence. So based only on these grounds, you cannot discriminate against someone when it comes to public employment. Now to this general provision, from these two clauses you understand that it lays down the general rule that no citizen can be discriminated against any employment or office under the state on the grounds mentioned here: race, caste, sex, so and so. So but you see that this Article 16 does not prevent the state from prescribing necessary qualifications and selective tests for recruitment for government services. So the state can always prescribe certain qualifications for a certain post or a certain test for recruitment. See, for example, you may have a written test or a physical fitness test. So these qualifications does not come under the provisions of Article 16. These qualifications are not against this equality of opportunity in public employment. So see, there are cases or posts where the knowledge or technical qualification is necessary, so the state can definitely prescribe the necessary qualification. So that is in no way violative of this principle of equality of opportunity in public employment. Okay, so coming back, now there are three exceptions to this general rule of equality of opportunity in public employment. Number one, Parliament can prescribe residence as a condition for certain employment. Number two, the state can provide for reservation of appointments or posts in favor of any backward classes which are not adequately represented. And number three, a law can provide that the incumbent of an office related to religious or denominational institution or a member of its governing body should belong to a particular religion or denomination, which means that if the incumbent of an office related to a religious organization or a member of a governing body of that organization may belong to that particular religion. So other constitutional right to equality of opportunity in public employment എതിരായിട്ടുള്ളതല്ല. Okay, so by law you can always provide that, you can always say that, or you can always keep aside such offices for the members belonging to that particular religion. Now, this part, that the Parliament can prescribe residence as a condition for certain employment or appointment in a state or union territory or local authority or any other authority. See, this is an exception, which means that Parliament can make residence as a criteria, or it can make residence as a criteria to exclude somebody from a particular type of job. But you have this act called the Public Employment Act of 1957, and it expired in 1974, and hence today we do not have this provision except in the state of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. So in no other state you can have residence as a criteria for discrimination. Now what see, when I say residence as a criteria for discrimination, what I mean is that see, you might have heard of issues where only certain government post in maybe in any other state, um, they are actually looking for people who are natives of that particular state. So only if you belong to that particular state, only if you speak that language, only if you are native of that particular state, you can apply to certain government post. But we have done away with this because this Public Employment Act of 1957 is no more, it has expired. See, the Constitution has prohibited this reservation based on domicile or place of residence because in India we have a common citizenship, okay, or universality of Indian citizenship, which means that citizens have the liberty to move around freely in any part of the country. They can settle anywhere. So if you make place of residence as a criteria for employment to a certain post, then this would go against this principle of common citizenship. So it is for this reason that we have not reserved jobs for the locals. Okay, so now the next exemption was that the state can provide for reservation of appointments or posts in favor of any backward class that is not adequately represented in the state services. So this is actually related to the Mandal Commission and the things that followed. I believe we had discussed this in the previous video, but I'll just sum it up once again for you. See, according to Article 16 Clause 4, the state can make special provisions for the reservation of appointments of post in favor of any backward class of citizens which in the opinion of the state are not adequately represented in the services under the state. Now, the Supreme Court has already maintained that this reservation for backward classes should not be unreasonable. So, it should be considered having regard to the employment opportunity of the general public. So, in 1964, you have a famous case called the Devdasan versus Union of India case, AS in 1964, which actually questioned the constitutional validity of a concept called carry forward rule. So now what is carry forward rule? So the rule framed by the government provided that if sufficient number of candidates belonging to SC or ST were not available for appointment to the reserved quota, then the vacancies that remained unfulfilled may be treated as unreserved and may be filled by the fresh available candidates. Okay, I hope you get it. So it simply meant that if sufficient number of candidates belonging to SC or ST were not available for appointment, then those vacancies that remained unfilled may be treated as unreserved and they may be filled by the other available candidates. But However, the corresponding number of posts would be reserved in the next year for the SC and ST. See, for example, if this year you have, just a hypothetical example, you have 10 posts reserved for SC and ST. But for various reasons, only 3 of the 10 were filled by the SC/ST community. So you have 7 posts remaining. So this year, the government will fill all the 7 with fresh, whatever available candidates they have from any other community, the unreserved category. And next year, this 7 will be added to the existing vacancies, existing reserved vacancies of that year. So that was this carry forward rule. Now, when this was challenged in the Supreme Court struck it down and said that this is unconstitutional on the ground that the power vested in the government, to make provisions for the SC/ST should not be exercised to deny reasonable equality for members of classes other than the backward classes, because you cannot carry forward this vacancy forever. Okay. Because each year the recruitment must be considered by itself. The court said that each year the recruitment must be considered by itself. So reservation for the backward communities should not be excessive as to create a monopoly. So court held that the reservation ought to be less than 50%. Now, then you have the famous Mandal Commission case, which is technically called the Indira Saini versus Union of India case of 1993. Now, the brief background about Mandal Commission was already done. I told you, in 1977, Morarji Desai appointed the Second Backward Classes Commission under the chairmanship of B.P. Mandal. Now, the purpose of this committee was to investigate the socially and educationally backward classes within the territory of India, and then recommend steps which are to be taken for their advancement. Now, the commission gave its report, which was called the Mandal Commission report. It maintained that 27% of government jobs should be reserved for this socially educationally backward classes. But what happened was that meanwhile the ruling party, the Janata government, collapsed. Congress party comes to power under Indira Gandhi. Now Indira Gandhi government did not want to implement the Mandal Commission report. But then this Indira Gandhi government, the Congress party government under Indira Gandhi, they again was defeated in the 1989 elections, and Janata party comes to power, Janata Dal comes to power. So VP Singh was the prime minister. So his government issued a memoranda reserving 27% seats for backward classes as per the recommendation of the Mandal Commission. Now, a lot of violent anti-reservation movement followed this. We had a huge loss of persons and property. Petitions were filed in the Supreme Court, which challenged the validity of this 27% reservation. Now, the Supreme Court stayed the operation of this memorandum. Meanwhile, the Janata government collapsed in 1991. So, memorandum was stayed in 90. The government fell in 91. Again, Congress party comes back to power, but this time under P.V. Narasimha Rao. So, P.V. Narasimha Rao, this government headed by P.V. Narasimha Rao, they issued another memorandum in 1991 with 2 changes to the previous one. Number 1, the first change, 27% reservation would be given to backward classes, or rather the poorer sections of the socially and educationally backward classes. Okay, So 27% reservation to backward classes, which will go to the poorer sections of the socially educationally backward class. The next was 10% of vacancies to be reserved for economically backward sections of the higher caste. Okay, so the second change that was given in the memorandum by P.V. Narasimha Rao government was that 10% vacancies should be reserved for the economically backward sections of the higher castes. So now this matter was referred to a special constitutional bench. Now the constitution bench of the Supreme Court held the following. Number one, it upheld that this 27% reservation for backward classes is valid, but the reservation can be implemented only when the creamy layer among them is eliminated. Number two, the government has to set up a commission to exclude the socially advanced persons, which means the creamy layer should be excluded, and to find out who belongs to the creamy layer, the government or the state may set up a separate commission. Then it said, if somebody belonging to backward class becomes a member of IAS, IPS or any other All India service, then he could not seek the benefit of reservation for his children. Now it also said that the maximum limit of reservation cannot exceed 50%. So again, regarding the carry forward rule, it said carry forward rule is valid provided that does not result in the breach of 50% reservation. So you can go ahead with the carry forward rule, but the total reservation should not exceed 50%. And it also said reservation cannot be made in promotions and it will be confined only to initial appointments. And interestingly, it said that 10% reservation for the economically backward classes among the higher caste is unconstitutional. Okay, it said the 10% reservation for economically backward classes among the higher castes is unconstitutional. So, and finally it said that those states where the reservation is more than 50%, they have to reduce it to 50%. But then, you have this, for example, you have the Tamil Nadu government, which already had, more than 50% reservation. They did not reduce it to 50%. And to escape from the judicial review or save from the judicial review, they included this law in the 9th schedule of the Constitution. See, 9th schedule of the Constitution is basically a set of laws which are kept away or aloof from the concept of judicial review. So 9th schedule, original constitution it was later on created. So original constitution only had 8 schedules. So 9th one was later on added. And what was the purpose of 9th schedule? This was basically to save or protect certain laws from the judicial scrutiny. Now, the original purpose of the 9th schedule was to protect the agrarian reform laws and for abolishing zamindari system and all. But then later on, we added various other laws also to the list. Okay, so now this was the judgment of the Mandal case, the Indira Saini versus Union of India case. Now, we have to see here that we have an 85th Amendment Act So what is 85th Amendment Act? Sorry, it's not the 85th Amendment Act, rather it's the 103rd Amendment Act of 2019. This was a very recent amendment. Rather, this was a very enabling clause which was added to Article 16. It said that a reservation may be 10% reservation may be given for economically weaker sections of the citizens. Now, the original wording of this clause 6 of Article 16, which was inserted through the 103rd Amendment Act of 2019, it says that nothing in Article 16 shall prevent the state from making any provision for the reservation of appointments or posts in favor of any socially weaker sections of citizens other than the socially, educationally backward classes, scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, in addition to the existing reservation and subject to a maximum of 10% of posts in each category. So this was a very recent development which said that the state may provide an additional 10%, additional maximum of 10% reservation for whom? For the economically weaker sections of citizens other than those belonging to the socially, educationally backward classes, SCs and STs. So now this is also an exception under the Article 16. Now the next is Article 17, which is about abolition of untouchability. Abolition of untouchability. Now, Article 17 abolishes or declares untouchability as forbidden. Okay, so it abolishes the practice of untouchability or forbids its practice in any form. So the enforcement of any disability arising out of untouchability shall be an offence punishable under the law. Okay, so if you practice untouchability in any form, it naturally becomes an offence because untouchability has been abolished and its practice has been forbidden. But you know that the Parliament can always make a separate law to give effect to this abolition of untouchability. Okay, so instead of simply saying in the Constitution, or listing in the list of fundamental rights that untouchability has been abolished, what is to be done is that government has to make a separate law and prescribe punishment for this offence, because you have to have a separate law so that you give a list of activities that comes under untouchability, and then you detail out what are the punishments that you will have to undergo if you are an offender under this particular act. Now, for this purpose, the Parliament enacted the Untouchability Offences Act of 1955, and this was later on renamed as the Protection of Civil Rights Act. And you should note here that this word untouchability has not been defined either in the Constitution nor in this Civil Rights Protection Act. So you see here that the Mysore High Court has held that the subject matter of Article 17 is not untouchability in its literal or grammatical sense. So, but it should be seen as a practice that had developed historically in the country. So this refers to the social disabilities imposed on certain classes of people or persons because of the fact that they happen to be born into a particular caste. Now, I told you untouchability has been left undefined, but it is given a list of acts which may be treated or considered an offence under the Untouchability, Protection of Civil Rights Act. So you may go through it from your reading material. For example, preventing any person from entering any place of public worship, justifying untouchability on traditional religious grounds, denying access to any shop, insulting a person belonging to scheduled caste, refusing to admit persons in hospitals, education institutions, hostels, etc., preaching untouchability, refusing to sell goods or render services to any person, it also includes preventing any person with regard to the use of any public tap, other sources of water like reservoirs and roads, cremation grounds, etc. So these are all various examples for acts that may be considered acts of untouchability under Article 17. Now, the Civil Rights Protection Act has prescribed punishment for the above stated offences as imprisonment up to 6 months and also with a fine which may be extended up to 500 rupees, or you may either have imprisonment or the fine or sometimes both. So there is also a provision that the person convicted for this offence of untouchability shall be disqualified for election to the parliament. He can no longer contest as a candidate in the parliament or the state legislative assembly elections. Now, the act further imposes a duty on public servants to investigate such offences. So, it's a duty of public servants to investigate when such offences are reported. So, if a public servant willfully neglects this investigation, then he shall be deemed to have abetted the offence or abetted the offence punishable under this act. See, what is to be remembered here is that the object of Article 17 and also the Civil Rights Protection Act of 1955 is to liberate the society from blind and ritualistic adherence and traditional belief which has lost all legal base. So this basically seeks to establish new ideals for the society, basically equality of Dalits at par with the general public, absence of disabilities or restrictions or prohibitions or on ground of religion or caste rather. Okay, so the next one is abolition of titles. Abolition of titles. So according to Article 18, no title shall be conferred by the state to any person. But however, the state is not prevented or debarred from conferring military or academic distinctions, even though they may be used as titles. And you should also note here that the state is not debarred from conferring any distinction or award which cannot be used as titles. See, so thus this award of Bharat Ratna or Padma Vibhushan they cannot be used by the recipient as a title, and it does not come within the constitutional prohibition. So, according to clause 2 of Article 18, Indian citizens are prohibited from accepting any title from foreign state. So, under what circumstances are the Indian citizens prohibited from accepting titles given by the foreign state? Number 1, a non-citizen of India who holds any office of profit under the state cannot accept any title from a foreign state. So, a non-citizen of India, but he happens to hold an office of profit which is under the state control. So, he cannot accept a title from the foreign state. But he can accept it provided he gets the consent of the president. Again, a person holding any office of profit under the state cannot accept any present, emolument or office of any kind from or under any foreign state. Okay, so any person holding a profit or an office of profit under the state cannot accept any present, emolument or even office of any kind either under the foreign state or from the foreign state unless he gets the consent of the President of India. So now it is to be noted that there is no penalty prescribed for the infringement of this above prohibitions, which means that Article 18 is only directory. So it does not prescribe any punishments as such, but rather they are more directory in nature. So till so far the Parliament has not passed any law to implement this Article 18. Parliament can always do it. Parliament can make a law to deal with people who accept title from foreign countries in violation of Article 18. But till so far we do not have such a law.